Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Judy Blake, and I am with Family to Family Network here in Houston, Texas. My apologies for starting late today and for technical difficulties. I am not able to show my face, which I don't know why, and that's very frustrating. So what we're going to talk about today is special education, top tips for successful ARD and IEP meetings. I first want to introduce Leonela Castillo. I believe you can see her. There she is smiling. And I also want to introduce Uni. Uni is our intern from the Philippines, and she's going to be advancing the slides for me. Thank you, Uni. So next slide, please. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We know that your schedules are very, very busy, and that raising kids is certainly overwhelming, and raising children with disabilities is even more overwhelming. Always remember that this is a really safe space. We know that there's going to be a lot of information. We do not expect you to remember everything. It's a lot. We get it. Some of you are new to this. Some of you might be new to Houston. Maybe you're from another state. So we welcome all questions. If you could just wait until the presentation is finished, that would be great. If for some reason you get bumped off, don't worry, just log back on and we'll go ahead and let you in. If you feel uncomfortable asking a question, just private message me or Leonela or Uni, and they can answer the question for you. Leslie Lawson, my other colleague, was not able to join us today. Just make sure that you mute yourself so everyone can hear the presentation. I don't know that we're going to finish in an hour. We may run over a few minutes, but I'll try my best. And I'll also send the recording when the presentation is finished. It's just really important that you complete the survey. Okay, next slide, Uni. So we always believe that it's important to work collaboratively with the schools. Really important. If some of you know the expression, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar. And we do believe in that. And we also know that it can be really challenging. We get it. We've all been through this, and some of us are continuing to go through it. So it's important to remember that you know your child better than anyone else. And because you know your child better than anyone else, you have rights as a parent regarding the special education process. It's so important to learn the rights if you want your child to receive a free and appropriate education. And the acronym for that, the abbreviation, is FAPE. And what FAPE does, for those of you who are new to joining our webinars, it requires schools to provide special education to meet those unique needs of children. So for example, my IEP, the individualized education plan that I had for my son, was very different than Leonela would have for her son. It was different than what Leslie had for her son. So the key here is that it's individualized, it's free, and it's appropriate. Parents know their children. You may not understand all of the rights that you have, but this is why it's so important to be educated so that you know what your rights are. Next slide, please. So the IDEA manual, and if you're not sure what IDEA is, that stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is federal law. It makes sure that public schools serve the educational needs of our students who have disabilities. So keep in mind, this isn't laws from Family to Family Network. This is nothing that Leslie and I just created. Our goal and the goal of Family to Family Network is to make sure that parents understand what their rights are. The IDEA manual is in both English and Spanish. It's important to read it, to learn it, and to take it with you when you go to these meetings. And I think that when you feel empowered because you have that information, then you are considered to be more of an equal member of that ARD IEP team, since they know that you know your rights. I think that schools are going through a really hard time right now. I know that it was difficult before COVID. COVID made it very challenging. And post-COVID, it continues to be challenging. Some kids are attending school for the first time because of COVID and everyone was locked up. There's high turnover in school districts. My sons graduated from Houston Independent School District, and everybody knows the challenges that they're having. So regardless of what school district your child is in, the IDEA manual and all that is in it, all of the information in it, pertains to your child. Please know this also includes charter schools, not private schools, but charter schools. So, KIP, Harmony, the IDEA schools, the IDEA schools, those are charter schools that receive federal funding, and they must follow IDEA. If your child attends ABA therapy, a private preschool, then these laws do not apply. Next slide, please. Tip number 3, the IEP. So again, that stands for Individualized Education Plan. And that's really the centerpiece of your child's, it's the centerpiece of that legislation pertaining to your child. What we always strive for with all of our children is that they have that free, appropriate public education. It's unique to them, and it's preparing them for further education, employment, and independent living. I realize that some of you have very small children on this call, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can barely get through preschool or kindergarten. I can't even imagine my child being employed somewhere or living independently or attending college. We realize that it's really hard to see down the road, and it's difficult because none of us can predict the future. But just know that schools need to follow IDEA, and the goal is to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So you have to think of that IEP, that individualized education plan, as a contract. It's a contract between you and the school. So it's your role as a parent to participate in the meetings, communicate with the teachers, and make sure that you always agree to what you're signing. It's no different than when you go to buy a car and you're signing a car loan. You want to make sure you know what you're signing. How long is it for? What's the interest rate? What are your monthly payments going to be? What's covered? What's the warranty? Well, this is no different when it comes to your child. So the more educated you are, the more empowered you will feel, and then the more you can advocate for your child. Can everyone hear me okay? Leonella, can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So what should you do before the ARD meeting? Make sure that you gather information. My son just turned 29 a couple of days ago. And so I've been through lots of ARD meetings, lots of IEPs. And you want to make sure that you keep in touch with the teachers long before that ARD IEP meeting. You don't want to just show up at the meeting, see the IEP, that individualized education plan for your child for the first time. You want to make sure that you have it beforehand. Make sure you get draft copies of evaluations. Where's your child at now? They call that present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. I know it's kind of an odd abbreviation, PLAF. You also want to know, what are the proposed IEP goals and objectives? Is there a behavior plan in place for your child? You know, what supplements, what other services is your child getting speech? You want to read through these documents ahead of time so that you know what people are going to talk about. So make sure that you get that information and you review it, highlight it, bring it to the meeting with you. This is your meeting, your time to have your voice heard so that you can speak up for your child and advocate for them. Next slide, please. So the evaluation. Know that all services that a child needs, they're based on that initial evaluation. Really, really important to realize that. So for example, any further data collection and further assessment, that was after that initial evaluation. So the timeline for that initial evaluation has to be met. But when it comes to further evaluations or reevaluations, there is no required deadline. So what I mean when I say that is, if you're new to the school district, say you're either new to Houston, maybe your child was in ABA therapy, you're just now joining the school district, maybe your child was in a private preschool, and now you're contacting the school district for the first time, what you want to make sure of is that your child is evaluated in all areas of suspected disability. So say your child has speech therapy. Really important, very, very important. But you go to the school and you already know that they have that speech delay. Maybe you also want them tested for autism. So if you want that done, you want to make sure that you put that in your email. You always want to make sure that everything is in writing. Keep copies, make sure you copy yourself. But the reason that we want you to know that the only deadline that the school has to adhere to is for that initial evaluation. Anything following up, as far as additional evaluations, there's no deadline. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. And if it doesn't, I'm happy to go over it again for you. Next slide. So it's meeting time. If you can, try not to go alone to a meeting. I think it's really intimidating when you're there as the mom or the dad, the caregiver, the grandparent, and there's sometimes people there you have never met before, and you want to feel comfortable. If you can, bring a friend or a relative, a neighbor. Obviously, if that person knows your child, that's even better. But at a minimum, they can be moral support for you, and they can be that second set of ears and second set of eyes for you. So make sure that you meet with, if somebody is joining you, ahead of time so they know your concerns. They know that your questions are being addressed. Maybe that person can be in charge of taking notes, making sure that the ARD agenda is followed, and just to provide that general support for you during the meeting. I always liked to take my child to the meetings, and I realized that children are not responsible for or required to attend ARD meetings until they're 14 or in high school. But I think it's really important that the people on the ARD committee see your child. They know who they are. They put a face to the paper, to the name. So maybe they can just introduce themselves. and just say something about themselves, how old they are, what's their favorite movie, what they like, what they dislike. And I think that's really important so that the committee really understands your child and can see them right before everyone is talking and discussing what the upcoming several months or school year is going to be like. This also helps your child prepare for the day when they are required to attend the meetings, which again is beginning in high school. So they can just stay for a minute or two. And if your child is nonverbal, I think sometimes when children are not verbal, parents think they can't communicate. Well, they can communicate. They communicate through their behavior. They communicate through technology, through pictures. Maybe they bring something that shows what their interests are. Anything that helps the ARD committee understand your child, because your child is more than the 35 pages of the IEP document or however many pages your document is. Next slide, please. So tip number 7, during the meeting, make sure that you ask questions. Again, this is your child and you're an important part of the team. You need to know what everyone's talking about. So it's important to ask questions. If you don't understand something, ask what it means. Perfect example is that someone sent me an email yesterday and they used a term that I wasn't familiar with, and it was SME. Well, I knew that DME was durable medical equipment, but I wasn't familiar with SME. So I thought, was it a typo or what was it? I emailed her and said, I try to keep up to date on my abbreviations, but that one I didn't know. And she said, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. SME stands for subject matter expert. Oh, okay, great. Kelly's shaking her head. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I didn't know that one either. So that's things like that. It's impossible to know everything. I consult with Leonella. I consult with all of my colleagues because you can't remember everything. There's so much information. You want to make sure that you ask for data to support the decision and find out how is that data being collected, and ask for support if you need it. If you ask these yes or no questions, you will get a yes or no answer. So if you say, well, like my son's name is Ryan, and if I said, how is Ryan doing in class? Oh, they're doing fine. Whereas if you ask more of an open-ended question, like, can you tell me what a typical day is for Ryan? What his typical mood is? Things like that will give you more answers. So you want to ask, what will it take? We believe in inclusion to the extent possible at Family to Family Network. Inclusion may not work for your child. Maybe it only works for part of the day. I know that with my son, he was in inclusion with his peers for part of the day. And then it got to be a little bit overwhelming for him because the class sizes were so big. So then he was in his special education class with the special education teacher for part of the day. So you want to create a plan that works best for your child and ask, what is it going to take to receive a specific service for them to be included in regular education? This type of question, it allows members of the ARD committee to make sure that they are brainstorming for solutions. What we don't want is these cookie cutter IEPs, if you will, that could be applied to anyone. It should apply to your child. And again, make sure that everything is documented in the minutes of the ARD meeting. Tip number 8. So during the school year, I touched on this before, make sure that you meet and communicate all year with the staff and the professionals who work with your child. You just don't want to make that meeting the only time that you talk to one another, see one another. I know that our teachers are so overwhelmed, and it's frustrating to me as an advocate in the community, as a previous parent in the school district, that teachers are not getting enough support. We all seem to find money for beautiful football stadiums and uniforms and things like that. But when it comes to, teachers' aides or paraprofessionals, additional technology, guidance counselors, social workers for the schools, for some reason, we seem to fall up short. And that's really frustrating to me. So it's not that the teacher is going to be able to communicate with you every single day, but certainly maybe a couple of times a week. You want to work together with the school before the meeting and to discuss any concerns and develop those goals for your child. It's not something that should just be done every ARD meeting, which is at a minimum once a year. So, if you have an ARD meeting in, say, March, and the next one is not until the following March, hopefully there's a lot of communication between you and the parent, between you and the teacher throughout the school year. If your child is getting speech therapy, communicate with the speech therapist. Some kids have ABA after school or maybe on the weekends. Connect the ABA therapist with the teacher. I always made sure that I did that with my son's speech therapist and the school teacher. Set up a communication system that works best for you and your teacher. It's hard because I know that you want answers right away. And I think our teachers are just juggling so much. There's so many students, so they may not be able to reply to you right away. I always preferred email because then I had a paper trail. And it's not because I was trying to, call somebody out on what they told me. It's just hard to remember everything. Keep in mind, if they tell you something in person, and this is for anybody at the school, or you have a phone call, that doesn't count. It's really what is in writing. So always make sure that, if the teacher does call you to say maybe your child had a really great day, maybe there was a challenge, maybe they had a question, what we recommend is that you document that phone call. Dear, Mrs. Johnson, thanks so much for calling me today regarding Billy. From what I understood, Billy had a really rough day. He wasn't sitting still. Billy got into an altercation with another student, whatever happened. And make sure that you have that in writing. Make sure it's documented, because that paper trail is what helps you remember everything when it comes time for those ARD meetings. Next slide, please. So document, document, document. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but again, you do need to put everything in writing and get responses in writing. If you are a parent who, is dropping your child off, maybe they're not taking the bus, maybe you're walking them into the classroom and you tell the teacher something, please don't expect them to remember it. They've got all of these other kids coming in, and I think it really is challenging for our teachers. So you always want to make sure that everything is in writing. Read and highlight the procedural safeguards regarding prior written notice, and we're going to go over that. You want to make sure that you know your rights, which are on page 2. and what is required when the school proposes or refuses to provide a service. So we put a link on there about prior written notice. There's a wonderful website called Texas Project First. And Leonella, if you could type that in the chat box, that would be great. Prior written notice, next slide, please. Oh, okay, I thought it had it back there. So what prior written notice is that when the school wants to suggest something for your child, any kind of change, or say, no, this is not needed, you as a parent must get prior written notice. And that's 5 school days. So for example, say the teacher emails you and says, oh, Mary doesn't need speech therapy anymore, so we're just going to discontinue that. Well, first off, they can't just make that decision on their own. It needs to be a committee decision. They can't just tell you that without letting you know at least 5 days beforehand. And they need to show documentation as to why Mary might not need speech therapy or why they want there to be a change in the schedule. So nothing is made without your consent, without your approval. And this is called prior written notice. It is part of your, what we call procedural safeguards. And we'll be going over that again in future sessions about what that is and why it matters. Say, for example, you wanted your child evaluated for autism, and the school said, no, that's not necessary. Okay, well, again, it doesn't quite work that way. They have to tell you why they do not want to evaluate your child for autism. So keep in mind, you do have those rights. Texas Project First. Leonella, I think you put that, let me look real quick. Oh, here, you know what? I will, why is it still saying waiting room? I don't know why it's doing that. For some reason, it's, oh, there you go. Great. Thank you so much, Leonella. So Leonella just put in the link for Texas Project First. If you're not familiar with that website, it's really great. It's in both English and Spanish. It was written by parents for parents, so they could understand their rights regarding special education in the public schools and charter schools. Really, really great. It has a search bar. So what you can do is you could type in, IEP meetings. You could type in ARD agenda. You could type in anything, almost anything, and it will bring you to that page and give you information. You could type in procedural safeguards as well. So tip number 10, getting educated. I can't tell you the number of times that I talk to parents, and some of them have rare disorders, some of them might have autism. Everybody has a different level of understanding. It makes me sad when a parent says to me, I really don't understand my child's disability. So what I do is I explain it to the best of my knowledge. And I know that when you go to a doctor's office or you're getting results from something, the specialist, their hand is on the doorknob and you're still asking questions. And I know that it can be intimidating. I know that it can be hard to sometimes speak up when they're running late or you have to be somewhere. But getting educated about your child's disability and how it impacts your individual child is really important. Because if you don't know what your child's disability is, how it impacts them, how do you advocate for them in school, in the community, at your place of worship? So you want to get educated. Hey, attending trainings like this are a great first step. There are other parent organizations. We are on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, like Family to Family Network, and you'll see that we post information about upcoming training sessions for other organizations and important legislation. You want to make sure that you have the ARD agenda to keep yourself organized during the meeting. If you don't know what the ARD agenda is, we are going to be covering that, or did cover it in a previous meeting, a training session, or you can go to Texas Project First and make sure that you know what the ARD agenda is. And basically what it is, it's like a pyramid, and it's a step-by-step process of what's to be covered during the meeting.
And
I
just know that one.
Whoops, I'm sorry. I'm at somebody else's place, and they have that Alexa, and Alexa's saying, wait, I don't know what you want. So my apologies. Cancel Alexa. So what you want to do is make sure that you're familiar with that agenda and know what the steps are. We put the link in there for you to help you understand. Leonella also added another great website called parentcompanion.org. And I think that's for parents who have children birth through 5 years old or 6 years old. I can't recall, but that's also in both English and Spanish. So you want to make sure that that agenda is being followed. Make sure that you use the tools that are provided to help you understand special education. So when I talked about, IDEA manual, Texas Project First, Parent Companion, procedural safeguards, things like that, that is going to help you make sure that you are prepared for the meeting. Thank you, Leonella. She also posted on Disability Rights Texas the IDEA manual as well. Next slide, please. Organization. Make sure you organize your materials. I used to always keep a folder. The folder turned into a notebook, like a binder. And I always make sure that I had my son's evaluations, be it private or from the school district. I had his most recent IEP, any report cards, progress reports, notes. Those emails are really important. And you want to make sure that you can find those documents easily. And the reason that you want to have this is because, again, you want to be a valued member of that IEP meeting, of that ARD committee. And the way that you have that is by being organized and having those materials so that you can speak about your child and advocate best for them. Tip number 12. Hold on one second. Uni is going to, here we go. So if you disagree with the ARD committee, that's okay. Again, we tell people to work with the school. You can't get everything because it's just so overwhelming, and you don't want to be picky about every little thing. But I think you need to pick maybe the top 2, 3, 4 items that you really, really believe are important for your child and push for those. This is public school, and it should be the best for your child. But unfortunately, it isn't going to be perfect, and nothing is. I sent my son to both private schools and public schools, and in private schools as well, even though I was paying for it, nothing was perfect. In my life, I go by the 80-20 theory. If 80% of the time it's going pretty well, that's pretty good for me, because there's always going to be that 20% where the teacher doesn't have a good day, the other students in the class don't have a good day, my son doesn't have a good day. So you just want to make sure that you select the items that are really most important to you. But if something really doesn't add up for you, if you don't understand what they're doing, if you don't believe that the placement is correct for your child, say the school says to you, your child can only be in special education. They cannot be with their peers. Well, that's not the least restrictive setting. And the goal of IDEA is to have our kids learning with their peers in the least restrictive setting. Well, if they're in special education all day with that class, they're not in a regular education class. So you can disagree, but then you have to take that next step. Say, for example, you told the school to evaluate for autism, and you believe your child has autism, and you don't agree with an evaluation or the outcome of the ARD meeting. You can request that independent evaluation at no charge. And the school must do that. Now, if they don't want to, remember when I said several slides ago about those procedural safeguards? Why are they refusing to do something? That's where that comes in. They can't just say, no, we won't do it. They have to tell you why. So if you don't agree with the programs or services, you're going to be given that opportunity to write down what you do not agree to. Again, this is where bringing someone with you with that moral support helps. You know, if the school says to you, oh, time's up, we've got to get to the next meeting, we're running late. I appreciate the position that the school is in. I know that it's stressful. I know they have a lot of paperwork and a lot of meetings. But at the end of the day, this is your child. And you shouldn't feel rushed. And maybe the meeting needs to be tabled so that your questions can be answered. Because if you didn't understand what happened at the ARD meeting, you probably want to disagree. And if you disagree, make sure that your written statement is reflected in the IEP, meaning in the minutes, in that individualized education plan. Because if there's no statement of disagreement, the committee is going to think that you agree with them. I think that, again, the more educated you feel, the more empowered you will feel. There is a lot of high turnover, especially in HISD and other school districts as well. And I do believe that people are trying the best they can for being so overwhelmed. And maybe sometimes somebody made a mistake in something. Sometimes the special education chairperson or the person running the meeting is new. So we all want to give some grace and have patience. But the one thing that we don't want is for you to agree to a plan that you're not really comfortable with. Next slide, please. So what they'll do if you disagree is they'll have a reconvene meeting. So basically another meeting, and it'll be scheduled within 10 days of the meeting, of your IEP meeting that you just had. Now, this is always the default. This might be extended. Maybe they're waiting for an evaluation on something. Maybe they're waiting for a report. Maybe all of a sudden your child got sick. But during that recess time frame, everyone needs to be working together to gather more information, especially if you don't understand what's going on in those IEP meetings. Because what you want to happen is when you come back, that everybody reaches an agreement. Again, you have the right to disagree. You don't want to pick about every little thing, but make sure that it's something that you're comfortable with. And if you're not sure about it, ask questions Know that you can disagree. Make sure that it's documented in the meeting. If you want, and I'm just going to touch on this, but if you want to request what they call a state facilitated IEP, you must do so within 5 days of the disagreement. And that's the disagreement of the first time you disagreed. And that's where someone comes in from the state to do that. Generally, though, the school does want to work with you. They don't want to go to mediation. They don't want to go to due process. Nobody wants to do that. So I think that people do try to work together. If you still disagree after that 10-day meeting that you had, that reconvene meeting, what's going to happen is the school's going to implement the IEP that it feels is best. And what you do is you take the next step to resolve that disagreement. You request mediation. You can file a complaint with the TEA, the Texas Education Agency, or you can file for a due process hearing. So just know that it's not over, but they have to do something while your child is in school. Next slide, please. You always want to create a vision for your child, and that vision is going to change through the years. When you first get the diagnosis and you're very overwhelmed, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't even make it past the next hour, let alone down the road. So what IDEA wants to do and prepares you to do is for that further education, training, employment, and independent living. Oh, you're so welcome, Margarita. And you want to make sure that that individualized education program or plan, some people say, that IEP, it's like a map, and it's getting you to that destination. Even if your child didn't have a disability, we all have hopes, we have expectations, we have dreams for our kids. We want them to grow up. We want them to be independent. So you want to go into these meetings with a pretty clear vision of what you want your child to do down the road. And we're not saying that if your child is 5 years old, you already have to know what they're going to do after high school. Not at all. But remember, they're in school and they graduate, and they can stay in school with the ARD committee decision through age 21. They can do that. But what's going to happen after they stop going to school? That doesn't need to be decided when they're a senior in high school or when they're 21 in a post-high school program. You always want to make sure that you're thinking of that in the back of your mind. No child ever rises to low expectations. No child ever rises to low expectations. We want to have high expectations for our kids. We want them to be included. Last time I checked, there was no McDonald's just for kids with disabilities. There was no Target just for kids with disabilities. When you go to the movie theater, sure, it might be a sensory-friendly movie that you're going to where they have the lights dimmed and it's a lower volume, but the movie theater isn't only for kids with disabilities. You want to make sure that your child is included with their peers to the extent possible. They're typically developing peers. So you want to, just take notes. Talk to the teacher, because this IEP is that map for your child. And once you have that vision, it's okay to change the vision. It's kind of like, you change your wardrobe. You go from winter, not that there's really winter in Houston, but you go from cooler weather to warmer weather, then you go back, and kids change, and that's okay. But keep those lines of communication open. Next slide, please. So something I want to talk about real quick are the Medicaid waiver programs. We just went over the top tips for ARD meetings, and there's certainly so much more that we could tell you, but we wanted to try to keep it within that hour time frame. If you are not familiar with the term Medicaid waiver programs, please email me, email Leonella, email Leslie. And Leonella, if you could put your email in the chat, that would be great. Medicaid waiver programs are for our kids. This is different than Medicaid insurance. And what they do is they work to make sure that our children do not end up in an institution, in a state-supported living center. 40, 50 years ago, we thought it was great for our kids to be secluded and separated, that they would be much better only with people who were just like them. We've learned that typically developing peers learn from our kids, and our kids learn from typically developing peers. So we want them to be in the community, in the home. What happens is these waivers don't look at the parent's income and resources. Unfortunately, the waiting list is horrendous. I'm talking 15 to 18 years. So you want to make sure that your child gets on that waiting list as soon as possible. I think there's a link at the bottom, Uni, if you hit the enter button again. Oh, okay. So here, it's on the next page. No, maybe not. There we go. Okay. So what you can do is learn more and compare each of the programs, and you want to make sure you sign up today. So if you're calling from, obviously, I think most people are here from Texas. And if you're calling from Harris County, there is the number there. And we've listed for Fort Bend County. If you're in a different county, because our trainings are for people all over Texas, there's a website link for you. But you want to make sure that your child is at a minimum signed up for class, community living and support services. You want to make sure they're signed up for HCS, which is home and community-based services, and that they're signed up for Texas Home Living. Please, please make sure that your loved one is signed up for these waivers. Your income is not taken into account because the wait list is so long, and by the time your child's name comes up, they'll probably be 18 anyway, and the state considers them an adult, and your income is not taken into account. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit more about the Medicaid waiver programs. Once I see that everyone has completed the survey link, I'm happy to send you the slide deck. But this just gives you more information. And also, this can be found on Texas Project First. And there's an excellent website if you're not familiar with it. Oh, can we have the link and more information on? Yes, there you go. There it is right there. Thank you for asking, Stacy. And also to Navigate Life Texas is a fabulous, fabulous website. You can put in the search bar Medicaid waiver programs and it will bring everything up for you. Next slide, please. So you have questions, we have answers. Let's go to the next slide. So Leonella has already typed it in the chat box, and there's the QR code. Uni, if you could stop sharing, that would be great. Thank you so much. So a couple of questions before I take questions. Stacy, if you could private message me, actually, that's not even working. If you can private message Leonella your last name, or if you could unmute yourself and give me your last name, that would be great. And then Vera, if you could let me know your last name. And The same for Heather Ryan and for Belton. Tabitha, I know yours, I believe, and Margarita, I just need to know your last name as well. So if you could just private message that to me, I would really appreciate it, because I want to make sure that I send you the recording, and we want to make sure that everyone completes the survey. So feel free to, let me see, let me scroll up for questions. Belton, my child began a part of her IEP in 7th grade versus 9th grade. That's a great idea, Belton. Yeah, you can always start them earlier. Whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever your child feels comfortable with. But I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Leonella, thank you for sharing all of the websites as well. Oh, you have a daughter moving to high school. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that can be challenging. Something that I did for my son when he started high school, because we all know that our kids can be targets for bullying, and that's really frightening on many levels. I always had my son's locker right outside the office of either one of the administrative professionals, the vice principal, outside of somebody's office. I always did that. And I think that really helped, because chances are you're not going to be bullied if they know there's someone right there in the office next to your child's locker. And I thought that was really, really helpful. So great question. Margarita, is this the same as Harris Health? It is not. So I'm so glad you asked that question. So Harris Health is where you get medical insurance. Yes, that's a medical provider. The Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD is what we call our local authority. They manage that HCS waiver and that Texas Home Living waiver that I was talking about. You can also have them evaluate your child. They also provide respite for families that qualify. Now, keep in mind, they will evaluate at no charge. However, their services for children, meaning birth through 17, they do charge based on parents' income. It's a sliding scale. So if you have a child that's already on Medicaid, chances are you're going to be okay. And I doubt there's going to be a charge. And if you do, it's minimal. But if you, have, earn $95,000, chances are there's going to be a family copay from the Harris Center. But in answer to your question, Margarita, Harris Health is a medical provider, whereas the Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD does evaluations. They have psychiatrists there. There's a psychiatric side, and there's an intellectual and developmental disability division as well. I hope that answered your question. Do admin teams dislike when you bring an advocate to an ARD meeting? Great question. I would hope not. I think that everybody needs support in their own way, Rena, and I think it's important that you do what works best for you. Again,
Thanks.
yeah, you want to work collaboratively, but I think that if you have an advocate and you feel comfortable and want to do that, absolutely. Just know what you're still agreeing to, because that advocate could move away, or they retire, or you didn't understand something. So I always tell parents, you just want to make sure you still understand everything that you're agreeing to, because it's your signature, not the advocate's.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, are some schools going to be like, oh gosh, here's another advocate with a parent? Yeah, I'm not saying that won't happen. However, if that's what you want to do, I think that you did. I didn't have to, because I always believed that forging that relationship with my child's teacher or the teacher's assistant or paraprofessional, the speech therapist, that's where I really focused. I always
Got
bake. I always baked for my ARD meetings. I'm a baker and I love to bake. So I always baked. So they really looked forward to my ARD meetings.
Oh,
But that,
that's amazing.
yeah, but that didn't mean that I was going to just agree to everything, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's my child. It's your child.
Right.
So that's a great question. Oh,
Thanks.
Belton, I'm so sorry. That's your last name. My apologies. Thank you, Heather Ryan. Jessica, we are planning to move out of Texas in the next year or two. Another that are exceptional or at least better. Virginia or Maryland, nothing set in stone. I would really contact and look on their websites. I would contact the ARC in those states. Texas, sadly, is not great. It's difficult. We have a legislature that meets every other year. I think that's challenging. And I think that we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. So I have heard good things about Maryland and Virginia, but again, I don't believe there's any such thing as a good or bad school district. I think that it's a matter of how does the teacher connect with your child and what are the other kids like in the class? To me, that's where it happens. The IEP is important. It's very important. It's a legal document. But communicate with your teacher. The other kids in the class, it's important that your child gets along with them and everybody is getting along together. Thank you for the last names as well. Okay, found out in my junior's ARD this year that her next ARD, if you aren't a guardian of your child, I thought this was insane. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's Mr. or Ms. Belton. Are you saying that when your child turns 18, yeah, what happens is, and this is getting into another subject, but you can still go to ARD meetings. Of course you can. If you have guardianship over your child, you're still signing the document. If you do not have guardianship over your child, then your child will also sign the document. And that's not because we feel that your child is able to make all of the decisions. It's just that the state is going to consider them at 18 an adult. So unless you have guardianship over your child, you're then invited to the meeting. It's your child that would be making decisions. Did that answer your question? Mr. or Ms. Belton, did that answer your question?
This is Ms. Belton. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. Yeah, did my answer make sense to you?
Yeah, we had an ARD meeting. Well, it does, but it doesn't. I was just aware. I didn't know that they don't have to even let us know. They don't even have to let us know once she turned 18 that they have an ARD. My daughter would have to let them know to call me. And I thought that was insane.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
what?
Yeah, especially if your child has an intellectual disability or adaptive skills deficits. I agree.
Exactly.
I
Yes, ma'am. I thought that was totally insane.
Yeah, I agree. To me, if your child is
But yeah, they said that's the new law. And I'm like,
yeah, well, if to me, if your child is in school, parents need to know what's going on, period.
Yep, that's what I said. I was like, yeah, they told me this ARD, which is she's a junior. And they were like, well, we don't have to let you know for the next ARD whenever she turns 18. We'll just let her know
Right.
And I was like, wait a minute, she's still under disability. She's still on the
Right.
IEP.
Right.
And not only that, she had an intellectual disability. What you mean? She's not really, grown, but
Right.
they were saying by the state is still
Right.
by her turning 18, she considered an adult, even under the IEP, everything. And I thought, what? I
Yeah.
said,
So
no,
what I would
I
do,
don't think that's correct. But I
what I
didn't
would do,
want to, because they were,
yeah. Does your daughter email Ms. Belton?
I mean, not really. I mean, they
Okay.
give them emails and
Yeah. So what you might want to do is if
school,
she
but I
let
mean, not necessarily unless I show her or whatever. No, not
right.
really.
So maybe if is she able to read by chance?
She is, but isn't. But I have
Is
to.
it okay?
What I'm doing is I'm training her. I'm
Right.
training her now. Whenever they ask you something, because she's 17. Whenever they ask you something, because I'm an accountant, and I said, well, you let them know. No, you need to talk to my accountant, which is my mother,
Yes.
and it basically puts it and how my lawyer was saying, it basically puts it in a contract stating that
Right.
I'm over her, but not over her, because I don't
Right.
want to have a guardianship. She's high function, so I don't
Right.
want the guardianship
So
over her, because I want her to be able to vote. I
right.
want her to be able to work and all that good
Exactly.
stuff. But what they don't tell you is that if you become a guardian over your child, they loses a lot of
Right.
rights. And
They do
I didn't want that to
to do
happen.
that.
But
You have
yeah, and
you
so
have you have
I was trying
that's
to
what I have. That's what I apologize. I wasn't trying to cut you off. My computer is just not well today.
I think the network is, yeah.
My
It is,
computer is
because
COVID.
you're breaking up.
Yeah, my apologies. But yeah, I have supported decision making. So what I would do is, maybe send a letter to the school, take a picture of it, send it to the principal, special ed chairperson, teacher, and have your daughter sign it so that I want my mom to attend all of my meetings, things like that. So they know and to be notified of all of
Yeah,
my meetings.
I have to get a particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they were just telling me that everything now has to be done by a judge, and I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I
No, it
don't
does
believe
not.
all that has to be
No.
done
Well,
with the
no,
school.
it does not. Supported decision making does not have to go through a judge. You just need an attorney to draw up the appropriate papers. And if you would like a list of attorneys, let us know. We can send you a list.
That'll work. That probably
Yeah. So
work
just
better, because
remind
I
me.
didn't want to
Yeah. Just remind me
go
and
back and
send me
forth
an email,
with her.
and that would be
She
great.
turns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so
Just
much.
you're very welcome, Ms. Belton. Let's see. My son and wife are not together, and my son has his daughter. They receive a minimum amount from Social Security. We're wanting to see how my son can receive the money for his daughter instead of the mom. Okay, so Vera, what you would want to do is email me or email Leonella so we can take that offline, because that's a really involved question and we want to help. We just need to find out what's been applied for your granddaughter, and how we can get that possibly changed to your son. So if you wouldn't mind emailing us, Vera, we can set up a time to speak with you, and Leonella or I can help with that. It's not that I don't want to answer the question. It's just I need to ask a lot of personal questions and I want to respect your privacy. Thank you. I have inherited a family member who is now, she is on the spectrum and her school is working. However, I'm not sure where to begin. I want to get this done before 18. And also, okay, so thank you, Tawny. Why don't you, again, email me? And I think we've been communicating back and forth. And for those of you who want the previous recordings, please email me and I will send those to you along with the slide deck. I just ask that you make sure that you complete the survey. So Tawny, happy to help you and educate you, and God love you for taking care of your family member and for inheriting them. I think I know it's a lot, and God love you for that. I think the Social Security office did like you stated, they went by my son's income and only gave his daughter a small amount for her needs. Yeah, again, Vera, I would need more information. So Leonella or I can help you with that. Thank you. And I have to go. My phone is dying. Oh, sorry. Okay, Jessica. Next training, April 17th, 1 p.m. Oh, I think Leonella meant to put 12 p.m. So the next training will be 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. And it's going to be all about Medicaid, CHIP, Medicaid buy-in program, and what should you apply for. We have a guest presenter that day. Thank you so much for posting that, Leonella. I'd like a list of attorneys as well. Okay, 20, just email me. And I will be happy to send that to you and to anyone else. Please send us an email and we can, oh, thank you, Leonella. Any other questions? Anything I didn't get? I hope this was helpful to all of you. We so appreciate your time. And if there's any other questions, don't hesitate to email Leonella or myself. And thank you so much for joining us. We are repeating this class at 6 p.m. You'll see the slides again. I can't say it's going to be exactly the same, but it'll be pretty similar because I'm going to be the one presenting. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Much.
Oh,
I
our
appreciate
pleasure.
you.
Oh, my pleasure, Kelly. Thank you.
All right. And I'm hoping that I'm going to email you. I would love to talk to you or someone soon
Sure.
regarding my situation. So thank you so much.
You are very welcome. I look forward to it. I'll set it up. Just be patient with us. We are so busy with our caseload. So just be patient. But we look forward to it.
No
Thank
problem.
you so much, Kelly.
Thank
have
you.
A great
You'll have
day,
a blessed
everyone.
one. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.